Salutations, everypup, and welcome to chapter 42 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, a link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's jump on into it. Chapter 40, Playing a Dangerous Game. Chapter Summary. Izuku does his best to survive. Author's notes. Hello, everyone! This is another long chapter, almost 8,000 words, but hopefully you will enjoy it. There are some trigger warnings for this chapter, mainly regarding All for One being a manipulative bastard and acting in ways that can be triggering for anyone who grew up with bad parents. So, please read with caution. Trigger warning: manipulation, gaslighting, bad parenting. It is dad for one, duh. Tomura Shigaraki's point of view. Things were not going so well for Tomura. That Bakugo brat was a hard nut to crack, and his efforts to show the teen some respect and let him out of his cuffs had only ended with him being punched in the face. He swore to himself as he held an ice pack to his burning face, wondering if maybe Sensei had been right about this being a bad idea. The man seemed to have a dislike for the explosive teenager. At least Sensei had been supportive of their decision of Midoriya, who was apparently his son. Tomura had been surprised, to say the least, when he had found out that Sensei had a son. He had met Midoriya by pure chance. Then he had talked about the supposedly quirkless teen to his sensei, who had spilled the secret of his family to him. Ever since then, Shigaraki had been curious about the kid and wanted to meet him again. After all, why would Sensei's son be interested in heroics? Just what was the teen playing on the other side? It wasn't until after the USJ incident that Tomura suspected Midoriya might be more genuine about being a hero than he first thought. The poor kid seemed to be completely brainwashed and hero-obsessed, which was definitely something they needed to fix. He had heard Sensei gush about Midoriya, practically singing him praises once he started talking about his lost son, and Shigaraki was determined to bring him over to their side, no matter what. With that in mind, Shigaraki headed towards the room they kept Midoriya in. He didn't bother knocking as he pushed his way inside. Sensei had given him permission to enter this room and talk with Midoriya, after all. He stepped inside, making sure the door closed behind him. He had the remote to open it on hand, so he wasn't worried about being locked inside. When he stepped inside the room, he couldn't see the teen anywhere, but then he spotted him, in his cat form, peeking out from underneath the bed. The cat meowed, looking up at him with squinted and untrusting eyes. It was honestly kind of cute. Before he could say anything, the cat stepped out from under the bed, and with a cloud of smoke, he was back to being a human. The glare he was sending Tomura was much less cute. "Oh, good! You're awake! And I see you've gotten dressed as well!" Shigaraki hummed approvingly, looking at the boy's attire. The teen definitely looked more fitting for his role as Sensei's son now. Before, he hadn't really been able to see it, but with the formal clothes, although uncompleted without the tie and vest, he could sort of see the similarities, especially the curly hair that he remembered his sensei had had before his injury. "Shigaraki?" Midoriya greeted him with a glare. "Where's Kachan?" "Huh?" Shigaraki paused, wondering who he was talking about, before the nickname clicked. "Oh, that blonde brat? He's fine. Don't worry about him. We have someone keeping him company," he answered with a nonchalant wave of his hand. He'd rather not think about that bastard right now. His face was still hurting from being punched. Midoriya's glare deepened. "Why did you kidnap us? Why bring Katron and me here?" he asked, practically hissing the words out. "Well, seeing how you didn't want to play along, I figured you needed a little nudge in the right direction. That Gachan was more of a bonus character." "Okay. You still didn't answer why you took us." "Isn't that obvious?" Tomura answered with a smile. "I want you to join our team, of course. Think about it. All that wasted potential playing a hero. Why would you want that when you can work with us?" At that, Midoriya laughed, and Tomura frowned at him in confusion. Had he said something funny? Why would I ever want to work with you? You're a villain, Midoriya spat out. Tomura sighed deeply and shook his head. Poor, brainwashed kid. I see. Sensei wasn't kidding when he said this might take a while, he muttered as he stepped further into the room and sat down on the bed before pulling out 2 gaming consoles. How about a game? He suggested before handing one of the controllers to Midoriya. What? Midoriya asked, his face turning from one of distrust to surprise. A game! You know, gaming. I heard you like that stuff, Tomura explained as he waved the console in Midoriya's direction. Yeah, when I was a kid, the boy huffed, crossing his arms. You're telling me you don't like it now? Tomura asked with a grin, although he was a bit worried the teen would say no. I don't really have time for games, Midoriya said quietly. At that, Tomura's grin widened, and he waved the controller more insistently. Well, you have all the time now! Come on, one match! Reluctantly, Midoriya took the offered controller and they booted the game up, playing together in silence. Tomura couldn't help but smile, happy to finally have a player too. As soon as he had heard that Midoriya used to be into gaming, he was absolutely delighted. They played in silence for a while, venturing through the dungeons. They even managed to unlock certain treasures which you could only reach with 2 players. I still don't understand why you're doing all of this, Midoriya muttered, breaking the silence. Huh? Oh, we have to defeat the goblins in order to reach the... No, not the game. I mean, all of this, Midoriya groaned, gesturing to the room around them. Why did you kidnap me? Why are you even a villain? And why are you playing a game with your hostage? You're not a hostage, Tomura pointed out, causing Midoriya to look at him in surprise. You're more like an honorary guest. Family, I guess. Any son of Sensei is obviously an ally. I'm a hero, Midoriya insisted. So you keep saying, but it's not too late to turn over a new leaf. Oh, you missed a chest. Midoriya frowned as he opened the treasure chest, and they kept venturing into the dungeon. For a while, both sat in silence. It's not too late for you, too, you know? Midoriya said quietly, causing Tomura to tilt his head curiously. I mean, you don't have to be a villain. I'm sure if you turned yourself in, we could find a way for you to start over. That had Tomura let out a laugh. And why would I want to do that? I like playing on the winning side, he said with a grin. This isn't a game, Shigaraki. Midoriya sighed softly, looking extremely sad for some reason. Sure it is! Life is a game, after all, Tomura answered offhandedly. And if hurting a few NPCs means winning, then that's what I'll do! Is that what All For One told you? The boy asked, lowering the game to instead look at him. Tomura paused the game, thinking over his answer. Well, not in those exact words, but the message was still clear. We fight to win, he eventually answered with a shrug. That's sad, Midoriya said softly. Huh? Why is that sad? Tomura asked with a frown. I mean, don't you care about others getting hurt? The boy asked, frowning back at him. Why would I? Tomura answered with a grimace before turning back to unpause the game. What, you feel bad for these goblins too? He asked, gesturing to the monsters on screen. They're just NPCs. Kind of. I never was good at these types of games, Midoriya admitted with a frown. But that's also not the same at all. These game characters don't feel anything, I know that. But real people do. They all have their own lives and people who care about them. That had Tomura pause again, thinking it over. He guessed that it made sense. But why should he care about that? Sensei told him they didn't matter. It's what he's been told his whole life. So, why was Sensei's son telling him the opposite? You're weird, Tomura concluded with a muttered groan. I think I'm more normal than you, Midoriya chuckled, not looking offended at all. Tomura scoffed at that. Perhaps. They continued to game in silence until Tomura eventually had to go back. Midoriya didn't even try to stop him, nor did he try to leave. Tomura had a good feeling about him. He was sure that they'd be playing on the same side soon. Izuku's point of view. Well, that was weird, Daigoro said, crossing his arms and looking at the valve door the teen had just left through. Tell me about it, Izuku groaned, falling back on the bed he was sitting on. What is his deal anyway? Maybe he's just lonely, Nana suggested as she sat down next to him. I guess, Izuku said slowly before shaking his head. But does he have to hang out with me? Like you didn't enjoy playing in that game with him, Second huffed, sounding very judgmental. At that, Izuku blushed a bright red, shame filling his very being at the reminder. Well, what was I supposed to do? It's not like I can get out of here anyway, he defended himself. Izuku is right. Don't be mean, Second, Yoichi backed him up. I think it's smart of you to be friendly with them. The more trust you earn, the more freedom they might give you. What? Izuku blinked up at the ghost. Oh, yeah, that's actually pretty smart, Nana agreed with a hopeful smile. Wait, what? Hold on, you want me to pretend to be a villain? Izuku asked, sitting up and staring at the ghosts in disbelief. Just until you get rescued, or find a way to leave, Yoichi answered with a shrug. Think about it. The more you fight them, the more they will pull the leash. But if you play along, they will eventually let up. That does make sense, I guess, Izuku hummed thoughtfully. But what should I do? I don't know how to be evil, he said with a grimace. For some reason, the vestiges started laughing at him. You don't have to be evil, Nana laughed. Just be your adorable self. Just smile and nod along to what they are telling you, and you should be fine, kiddo. It's that easy? Izuku asked with a frown, not really believing it. At that, the others paused. Yoichi looked deep in thought for a long moment before he answered slowly. In most cases, no, he answered honestly. But considering my brother's fondness of you, I'm sure he won't question it. He'll probably just be overjoyed at having you join him. It could also be a good way to gather intel, Nana thoughtfully added, when she saw how Izuku still wasn't convinced. How so? The boy asked, tilting his head. Well, say you play the part of a curious kid. You could ask him about his family business of his, and he would probably answer more than happily, Yoichi answered as he began pacing around the room. My brother loves talking about himself, and if his son started asking questions or showing interest in his work, I just can't see him not being happy about that. He's always been a damn narcissist, Second agreed. Isn't that a bit risky, though? Hikage asked, not sounding convinced at all. Wouldn't it be better for him to try to stay low until the heroes arrive? Well, it's not like we have many other options here. I say give it a chance, Diagora answered with a shrug. All that said, it's up to you, kiddo, Nana said gently, turning everyone's attention back to him. What do you say? Do you think you can play pretend with the biggest villain around? Izuku hesitated and swallowed nervously. I think it's worth a shot. He then paused and looked over at Yoichi. You'll have to help me, though. You know him better than I do. At that, Yoichi gave him a small smile. Of course, nephew. I won't leave you alone with him, he said. And despite looking terrified at the thought of facing his brother, there was also a spark of determination in his eyes that reassured Izuku. If playing villain was what it took to get them out of here, then that's what they would do. All for one's point of view. Hisashi hadn't expected his son to put up Hisashi had expected his son to put up more of a fight about being captured, but when he went to visit him the next day, he was a lot more docile than the day before. Perhaps letting Shigaraki and him hang out, as they call it, had been a good idea after all. He hadn't been sure about it at first, considering Shigaraki's temperament, but seeing how Izuku seemed much more willing to talk with him now, he guessed the two had gotten along rather nicely. Sure, the boy had glared at him when he walked in, but had otherwise been rather civil. He'd even asked him about his work. Oh, how Hisashi had missed talking with his family. "Are you not going to fight me on eating?" Hisashi asked when he handed the tray of food to his son, who took it without question. "No," the boy answered quietly, frowning down at the tray. "I think if you wanted to hurt me, you would have done so already, right? But the meal was fine yesterday, so I trust you." Those words had Hisashi pause, and he stared at his son in utter disbelief. "I trust you," he had said. Izuku, his dear son, trusted him! Hisashi couldn't fight back the smile on his face, and he wished more than ever that he didn't have to wear this mask, just so Izuku could see how happy those simple words had made him. He certainly hadn't expected the boy to turn around this quickly, but, well, he certainly wasn't going to complain about it. And he knew this was just the beginning. Sure, he had earned his son's trust, but he still had to work hard to keep it. "I see," he said as he sat down next to the boy. "I am very happy to hear that, my boy. Did you have fun with Shigaraki earlier?" "It was interesting," the boy answered slowly. "I still don't really know how to talk with him, but I think we bonded a little." He said the last sentence more like a question, as if he wasn't sure what to believe. Hisashi smiled at the idea of the two of them getting along, though he was also a bit sad that friendship seemed so foreign for Izuku. Hopefully, he'd learn to trust Shigaraki too soon. "That's good. I'm glad two of my successors are getting along. You two have a lot you can learn from each other," he said honestly, as he reached out to run a hand through his son's hair. It was really soft, and he didn't see any reason not to do it. He also ignored the small flinch from his son, choosing to pretend he didn't notice. "Is that so?" Izuku asked, voice shaking slightly before he cleared his throat. "Where did you find him, anyway?" "Oh, that. Hmm. I think that is a story for another day. Let us just say I took him in when no one else would," the man answered. He wasn't sure how much he wanted to tell his son about Nana and her grandkid just yet. "So, you raised him? Why didn't you take him home to us?" the boy asked. Hisashi paused at that, the thought never having really crossed his mind. He'd only taken Shigaraki in despite All Might, since the boy was the grandkid of his beloved mentor, and he hadn't wanted to mix his work with his home life. But how different would his life have been had he taken Shigaraki home? Would he have befriended Izuku? Would they have been close if they grew up as brothers? He shook his head, ridding himself of those thoughts. Shigaraki was not his son. He was just a tool. But still, the image of Izuku having an older brother there to protect him was a nice one. Um, are you okay?" Izuku asked, hand reaching out as if he wanted to shake his shoulder but not daring to actually touch him. "I am fine," Hisashi answered with a sigh. "I just got a bit lost in thought there. I guess I never really considered the possibility. It just made more sense to raise him here." Izuku, thankfully, didn't question him more on that matter, and they soon changed the subject. They continued talking throughout the meal, and Hisashi couldn't help the swell of pride in him as they talked. His son was just so clever. and would ask complicated questions about his work. The two of them even spent a long time discussing his many quirks. Hisashi wondered if perhaps the boy was interested in them because he wanted some new ones for himself. If so, Hisashi would gladly give him a collection of his own. That would be far that would be for much later though, after his son got more adjusted into being part of the league. He eventually had to leave, but that had been a rather positive experience. He was now convinced that, with time, they'd have Izuku on their side. Hisashi couldn't be more proud. Izuku's point of view. Never make me do that again, Izuku groaned as he threw himself back on the bed. That was awful! Yeah, tell me about it, Daigoro grimaced. I'm sorry, Izuku. I didn't think he would go into so many details about his work, Yoichi said apologetically, looking a bit pale. And he sounded so proud of it, too, Nana fumed as she paced around the small room. I knew he was a sick bastard, but the things he's done, I mean, just... We don't need a recap, Izuku yelled, already feeling sick to his stomach. It was my bad for asking about it in the first place. I wasn't expecting the gruesome details. At least you got information, Hikage murmured quietly. Izuku groaned at the idea of having to relay all he had learned to the heroes. All the people his dad had killed, the Nomus and how they are made. It wasn't pretty. It had taken everything in him not to show any reaction as the villain talked about it. And talk he did. It felt like they sat there for hours, as All for One just went on and on about himself and his work. Ugh, was that really how Izuku sounded when he rambled? A little bit, yes, Daigoro teased, and Izuku blushed when he realized he had just said all of that aloud. Though you definitely talk about much more pleasant things, Hikage reassured him, earning agreeing nods and murmurs from the others. They spent some time alone after All for One left, though they weren't sure how long exactly. The villain eventually returned, once again bringing food, and just like before, they spent their time talking. Yoichi, despite looking seconds away from throwing up, stayed brave and right by Izuku's side the whole time. And just like before, the man would offer him advice on what to say to best please his brother, as well as let him know when he slipped up and let some of his real emotions show. Izuku was extremely grateful for his uncle's presence. He wasn't sure how he would be able to get through these conversations without him. It was especially helpful whenever his dad would reach out to ruffle his hair or give him a hug, and Yoichi would be there by his side, holding his hand with his own cold one and steadying him. He wasn't sure that, if it wasn't for the ghost, he was sure that, if it wasn't for the ghost, Izuku might have broken down crying just from those small touches alone. It just felt so fatherly, but also wrong. Nothing like when his real dads would hug him. God, he missed them so bad. Swallowing down his own anxiety, Izuku forced himself to relax as he finished his food. He handed the tray back to the man, who took it without a word. They then stared at one another for a long moment, and Izuku wondered what the older man was thinking. Now, what do you say after eating? All for One asked him, sounding strange. Um, thank you? Izuku answered, though it came out more like a question. He glanced over at Yoichi, who looked just as confused as he felt. Thank who? All for One prompted. It suddenly clicked what All for One wanted from him, and Izuku felt himself freeze up. It wasn't a big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal. But the title Dad only belonged to two people in his life, and this man wasn't one of them. Not anymore. And yet, he couldn't refuse, not without risking angering the man. Thank you, um, father? Izuku said, or rather asked, unsure if that was the right thing to say. At that, All for One had the audacity to laugh, causing Izuku to shrink into himself. Now, no need to be so formal. The man chuckled. Call me what you used to, he said. Or rather, demanded. Izuku swallowed nervously and glanced over at Yoichi for help. The man just frowned sadly at him and shook his head, indicating that Izuku probably didn't have much choice in the matter. Um, th- thank you, Dad, Izuku said quietly, stumbling over the word and hating himself for calling him by their title. Good boy, All for One praised, as he patted his head, sounding awfully pleased. Izuku's eyes stung with unshed tears, and he ducked his head to hide away as he struggled to breathe. Thankfully, the villain didn't seem to notice, or care, and he left soon after, leaving Izuku to deal with his breakdown alone. Yuichi and the others stayed right by his side as he cried. What was the most frustrating thing, though, was that he didn't even understand why he felt like this. Sure, one could blame it on being kidnapped and held prisoner, but that wasn't the reason he was crying. He just felt so used. Like he was supposed to be this good little doll that smiled and went along with whatever his dad said. The man had even taken that title from him, something that was sacred and belonged to those Izuku held dearest in the world. Izuku wiped away his tears, feeling frustrated as more tears rolled down his cheeks. He felt so stupid and like a crybaby. The villain hadn't even done anything bad. Not really. It was just a word. So why did it feel like the man had done something much worse when he hadn't? He'd been kind and they'd just been talking. There really wasn't any reason for him to feel like this. Stop that! Yoichi's harsh voice suddenly cut through Izuku's thoughts, and he whipped around to face the ghost. He was a bit shocked to find that the man was crying too. Stop what? Izuku sniffled as he wiped his face. Stop letting him get under your skin. You're probably thinking, isn't so bad, right? Stop doing that. Don't let him get to you. Yoichi rambled frantically, eyes looking haunted as he grabbed a hold of Izuku's shoulders. Please, just don't let him win. His voice shook as he said this, grip loosening as he slid his hands down Izuku's arms until he could hold his hands. Izuku's eyes widened, and he felt a bit of clarity flood back into him. What was he doing, sitting here and even questioning the villain? It didn't matter if what he did seemed harmless. The fact was he still kidnapped him. This whole situation was bad. What Izuku and the vestiges were going through made them feel bad. And nothing All for One did or said could change that fact or make their feelings invalid. I'm sorry, Izuku whispered, squeezing Yoichi's hands in his own. I won't let him win. I promise. Despite not needing to breathe, Yoichi let out a deep sigh of what was probably relief. Thank you, the man said. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. Me too, Izuku answered, feeling fresh tears roll down his cheeks as he pulled his uncle into a hug. They somehow managed to fall asleep, Broccoli having curled up as deep inside his nest as he possibly could. Their rest was interrupted, though, when the valve door opened. All of them tensed when they saw giant shoes stop at the side of the bed, and he tensed even more as he recognized them. It was All for One. Izuku, are you here, my boy? The villain called out. When there was no reply, the man sighed and kneeled next to the bed. I know you are down there, and that you are awake. I recommend you come out. Despite the seemingly innocent tone, Broccoli could hear a threat in the request, and so the small cat refused to come out of his hiding place, much to All for One's annoyance. You were so willing to work with me before. Why are you being so difficult now? The villain sighed, sounding annoyed. Suddenly, Broccoli was pulled from his hiding place by an invisible force. His eyes widened at the use of such a familiar quirk. It almost felt like when his mother would use her quirk on Izuku when he was little. There you are! All for One said fondly as he caught him. Broccoli hissed and struggled to get out of the man's grip. His claws caught on his skin, drawing blood. but his dad just laughed and the wound quickly healed itself. Once he realized that fighting was futile, Broccoli fell limp with an annoyed huff. The man seemed pleased by this and continued to hold and pet him. Reluctantly, Broccoli let out a small purr at the feeling. It felt good to be petted. Sue him. There we go. Isn't that much nicer? When you don't fight me, the man said, sounding awfully pleased with himself. Broccoli glared up at him, his tail twitching in annoyance as he let out a threatening hiss. The villain was unaffected by his hostility, though, and just hummed as he continued to pet him. I wonder if your quirk affects your mind. You do seem different when you are like this, the man mumbled, more to himself. The villain continued to hold and pet him for a while longer, before he eventually seemed satisfied and let him down. Once he was finally freed from the forced cuddle session, Broccoli wasted no time in rushing back to his nest beneath the bed. He furiously shook his fur, trying to get rid of the disgusting feeling. Somewhere in the room, he could hear All for One chuckle, and Broccoli was annoyed when he realized the man enjoyed his suffering. The sadistic bastard. After a while, All for One stood up, but Broccoli didn't relax until he heard the vault door close behind him. The cat laid down in his nest and tried to get comfortable. He could still feel that man's hands all over him, and he shivered. Just like the hugs Izuku had received, that had been nothing like when his dads would touch him. They'd always be so gentle and caring. This man, though, who Broccoli refused to call his father, hadn't cared about him at all. He just wished his real dads would come and rescue him already. Time continued to pass, and Izuku had no idea how long it had been since his capture. It could be days or even weeks at that point. He kept playing his part as the perfect son who was eager to please, even when it felt like he had lost parts of himself every time he had to sit through one of his dad's lectures or play together with Shigaraki. Though playing with Shigaraki slowly felt less than a chore and more like something fun, it definitely beats being all alone with the ghosts, or doing anything with All for One. With time, Izuku realized more and more just how lonely the older teen actually was, just like Nana had suggested. And he realized he really wanted to help him, not by becoming a villain, but maybe by becoming a friend? The vestiges called him naive for thinking the villain could change, and Nana just gave him a sad look. But still, Izuku was determined. Once he got out of here, he would try and help the teen out. One day, his dad decided to reward how obedient he was by letting him out of the valve, but not before making sure he was dressed accordingly, which basically just meant he had to add the vest and tie to his outfit. His dad also gave him some brand new shoes, much to his relief. He really didn't want to walk around the place barefoot. His tie was a mess, as usual, but the man had just laughed before helping him correct it. The action had felt awfully fatherly, and it made Izuku feel sick to his stomach. He stood straight as a rod while his dad helped him with his tie, not daring to move even an inch, afraid he would somehow mess it up or make his dad mad. Once that was done, the man seemed oddly pleased with himself, and he had ruffled Izuku's hair with a soft-spoken, "Good job." Izuku hated how the small part of him lit up at the praise. They ventured out into the lab, where All for One proceeded to show Izuku some of his research. And despite not agreeing with the man's actions, he had to admit that the researching of quirks did fascinate him, though he would never admit that. But judging by the smile on the man's face, he already knew. They entered a room when Izuku suddenly paused, his head hurting horribly as bile rose in his throat. It wasn't danger sense. No, this was something different. But he had no idea why it was hurting him. Considering the room looked completely ordinary, something about it just irked him the wrong way. It almost felt familiar. Izuku, what's wrong? All for One asked, having stopped once he realized Izuku was no longer following him. Have I been here before? Izuku asked uncertainly. Oh my, you have a great memory, it seems. Yes, once when you were young and so curious, you followed me to my work. Imagine my surprise when I found you in here, crying and shaking like a leaf. Why? Why was I crying? All for one paused before sighing. Probably because of the experiments we did that day. You had such awful timing, I swear. What was that kid's name again? The one who used to bully you? Subasa, right? Izuku paled at the mention of his old classmate, the one with wings who had disappeared without a trace all those years ago. Flashes of wings, but this time bigger and connected to a mindless monster, flashed in his mind, and the pain in his head only grew until he couldn't take it anymore, crying out in alarm as he clutched at his head. Oh no, I apologize. I did not think you would be so upset over it. Perhaps this tour was a bit early. What did you do to him? Izuku cried out, hands still clutching at his head as it felt like it was splitting apart. That, my boy, is something we will go over for another day. Now, I believe you should rest, his dad told him sternly. No, I need answers. Now, what happened to, who? What were we? Izuku trailed off, feeling dizzy and disoriented as he looked around, not recognizing the room they were currently in. How did we get here? He asked, suddenly feeling so small and confused. What? His dad asked, sounding just as confused as he felt. Izuku looked up at him, only to reel back in surprise. Why was his dad wearing such a strange mask? Dad? Weren't we just... I mean... Izuku shook his head, only to stagger and trip from how dizzy he was feeling. Izuku? His dad caught him as he stumbled, sounding awfully worried for some reason. We were... Dad? What? What were we talking about? Izuku asked. His head felt all messy and he didn't like it. The man suddenly grabbed his chin, forcing him to look up. His dad stared at him for a long moment, turning his head this way and that as he seemed to study him. Not a quirk, the man hummed. How fascinating. And also, a bit worrisome. Does this happen to you often? What? What are you talking about? Perhaps. The man paused, sounding unsure. Perhaps it is better if you do not know. I believe some things are better left in the past. Ezekiel was feeling so confused, and he wanted to ask more questions, but he was also feeling so tired, and he just wanted to go back to bed. Okay, he found himself agreeing, letting himself be led back to his room. He didn't fight as the man helped him remove his tie and vest, nor when he was tucked into bed. Almost as soon as his head hit the pillow, he was out like a light. Meanwhile, in the mindscape, so what the fuck was that? Diagora asked as soon as the kid fell asleep. I think Izuku remembered something he wasn't supposed to, Hikage answered slowly, looking a bit pale. And what does that mean? Diagoro barked, feeling frustrated. It means, Yoichi cut in, if I understand it correctly from those books we read, that his brain repressed certain memories of his childhood, and when he was about to remember them, his mind shut them off again. Hence his exhaustion. He tried to say it with confidence, but he was truthfully not so sure how any of this actually worked. It was the best he could think about, though, since it seemed to match what had just happened. It had felt like Azuki's mind was about to self-destruct for a second, before it hit a reset button and everything went blissfully quiet. So, he has been here before? Nana asked sadly. It appears so, Yoichi answered with a sigh. But, judging from my brother's reaction, he never truly meant for Izuku to see any of this. Whatever he did to that Tsubasa kid, it wasn't something Izuku was supposed to know about. They all sat in silence for a while, contemplating what this meant. Should we, tell him about it? The memory, I mean. We promised we would, but... Nana trailed off, looking between all of them uncertainly. It might do more harm than good, Yuichi finished for her. Yeah, she sighed, sinking lower in her seat. How about we let the kid sleep for now? Hikage suggested. Then we'll see in the morning. Or maybe wait until we're out of here. It might not be a good idea to open that wound when he is already so vulnerable. They all agreed on that and sat in mostly silence as they waited for their current holder to wake up. The next day, Izuku woke up with an awful headache. The vestiges were also acting weird, but they wouldn't tell him anything. His memories from yesterday were kind of vague and messy. He was pretty sure he and All for One had exited the vault, but he couldn't really remember much of it. Part of him really wanted to ask the vestiges about it, but another part of him also didn't want to know. And another part felt honestly a bit angry that no one was just telling him, since they had promised they would. So, yeah, he didn't feel like asking or digging for answers. Not when the vestiges had promised they'd tell him themselves. Was it childish? Perhaps. But he told himself that if it was something really important, then they wouldn't tell him. Still, he couldn't help but wonder what he was missing. And that feeling only grew once All for One showed up, and even he was acting weird. It was hard to describe, but the man seemed to almost be more gentle. Instead of sitting down next to him, his dad had pulled him into his lap and held him close while he ate. It felt really embarrassing and awkward, but Izuku knew better than to fight him. He expected his dad to let him down once he had finished eating, but instead, the man just held him closer. "Were you ever happy?" the man asked quietly, almost too soft for him to hear. Huh? Izuku blinked up at him in surprise, not really understanding the question. As a kid, All for One clarified, when I was still around, were you happy? Izuku was taken aback by that. He sat quietly for a while, trying to think of an answer. I, um, I think so, he eventually answered, as honestly as he could. To be fair, most of his memories from his childhood were blurry, but he thought he remembered a time before his dad left where he was truly happy. I see. I am glad to hear that. His dad sighed. And now? At that, Izuku had to fight the urge to grimace. Um, not, not really, no. All for One sighed again, this time deeper. I see, he said again. I will have to work on that, then. Izuku wasn't really sure what that meant, but before he could ask, his dad let him go and was already standing up to leave, though not before ruffling Izuku's hair one last time. I love you, my boy, the man said softly. The tone and overall mood coming from the man confused Izuku so much it almost hurt, and Izuku had no idea how he was supposed to react to any of this. Even Yoichi seemed overwhelmed. Um, Izuku stammered, his head once again hurting badly as he tried to think of what to say. I I love you too, Dad, he eventually answered, only because it seemed like the correct response. It seemed to work, as All for One finally pulled his hand away. Izuku could barely hide the sigh of relief as the man backed away. Shigaraki will pick you up later. Make sure to get dressed properly before then. I heard he wanted to introduce you to the League, All for One told him, before he finally left. Izuku let out a long and shaky sigh, which turned into a sob halfway through. Where the hell were the heroes? Just like his dad said, Shigaraki later came to get him. He'd tried to make sure he was dressed as properly as possible, though the tie was a mess, since All for One wasn't there to help him with it. Not that Shigaraki seemed to mind, though. Come to think of it, why was Izuku supposed to dress nicely while Shigaraki was allowed to wear whatever looked like pajamas? That hardly seemed fair. Izuku quickly shook his head. It didn't really matter anyway, and it wasn't like Izuku was an actual member of the League, so why should he care? He had expected them to leave through the valve door, but instead, a portal appeared before them, and Shigaraki kept a four-fingered grip around his arm as they stepped through it. When they stepped out of the portal, Izuku was surprised to find himself standing in the middle of what looked like a bar. There were multiple villains gathered there, as well as Kachan! Izuku cried out, automatically trying to run to his classmate, only to get stopped by Shigaraki's tight hold on him. Deku, what the fuck? Where have you been, you bastard? Kachan yelled. The boy was strapped to a chair, with giant cuffs surrounding his hands, making him unable to use his quirk. Now, is that any way to greet your friend, Kachan? Shigaraki said in a mocking tone, completely different from how he usually talked to Izuku. And here I thought I'd be nice and let you two see each other. What's going on? Izuku asked, looking between Shigaraki and Kachan with a confused frown. He thought he was supposed to meet the League, not this. Whatever this was. We've been having a bit of a hard time convincing dear Kachan here to join us. So we figured maybe you could help, Shigaraki explained, looking extremely annoyed as he glared at Kachan. What? Me? Izuku squeaked. Yes, you. Since you've been much more willing to join. If you can't convince him, then I'm sure Sensei would love to have his quirk, the older teen answered with a grin. It'd be a waste to let such a fine quirk go to waste, after all. Izuku swallowed nervously at that, and he glanced between the villain and his chained-up childhood friend, who was glaring daggers at him. I can try talking to him, but, I'm not sure it will work, Izuku offered softly. He knew for a fact that nothing he said would ever be able to convince the blonde to go villain, but maybe he could at least buy his friends some time before they decided to take his quirk. That's good enough for us, Shigaraki answered with a shrug, before tightening his four-fingered grip on Izuku's arm threateningly. Just don't even think about trying anything. Remember, we got you once before, and we can do it again. Izuku glanced between all the villains in the room. There were 8 of them in total, possibly more hiding somewhere, and he had no idea what most of their quirks were. Running right now would be foolish at best and suicidal at worst. Plus, he couldn't leave Kachan. I won't run, he told them firmly. Shigaraki gave an approving hum before finally letting go of his arm. As soon as he was free, he walked over to Kachan and sat down on a chair across from him. All eyes were on them, and Izuku was feeling very awkward as he tried to think of what to say. He couldn't exactly just admit to pretending to be a villain, not in front of everyone here, but he also didn't like the idea of tricking his friend. What if Kachan turned on him, thinking he had actually joined the villain sides? Hey, Kachan, Izuku said awkwardly. Deku, Kachan scoffed. What the fuck do you think you're doing here? Why are you free to walk around, huh? And what are you doing being dressed like that? They gave me these clothes. I didn't exactly have anything else to wear, Izuku answered, his face burning at the reminder. Whatever. You still didn't answer my question of what the fuck you're doing. What, you decided to play a villain or something? I found my dad, Izuku told him softly. He was unsure why that was what he decided to say, but he felt like Kachan, out of everyone, should know. You what? Kachan barked out, looking taken aback. He's a villain, a very big one, and, he wants me to join him? Izuku explained awkwardly, as he rubbed the back of his neck. And you're gonna do that? Kachan yelled, sounding equal parts furious and in disbelief. No, Izuku started to argue, only to cut himself off as he glanced over at the others in the room, who were listening intently. I don't know, he groaned, running a hand through his hair. I don't know, okay? What to think, about this whole thing. Fighting them doesn't really seem to be the answer. And what is that supposed to mean? Kachan scoffed, looking at Izuku like he had gone insane. And maybe he had. And yet, something about the blonde's tone annoyed Izuku, and he found himself glaring right back at his childhood friend. Well, just look at you. It's been days, and you're still locked to a chair, he bit out, gesturing to Kachan's restraints. Meanwhile, I'm walking around. So tell me, Kachan, how has fighting helped you so far? You fucking bastard! I'm not saying you should join them, Izuku cut him off. But it might help if you at least try to play nice. The blonde scoffed and rolled his eyes at that. I'm not gonna play nice with fucking villains! Then I guess you'll just stay locked up until their boss takes your quirk, Izuku answered bitterly. That had Kachan pause, and for the first time, it seemed like the blonde was actually listening. What? Kachan said, face having gone a bit pale. Kachan, they will take your quirk, maybe even do worse, if you don't play along, Izuku explained slowly, as if he was explaining something to an unruly child. It's your choice. Please, don't be stupid about this. Izuku hated to threaten him like this, but it was the only thing he could think of saying that might get through to the hothead. He knew Kachan would never join the villains, but he was also smart, and Izuku just hoped he could understand the benefit of at least playing nice until they were rescued. Alright, that's enough chit-chat, Shigaraki said, walking over to them and dragging Izuku to his feet. Sensei wants you back, apparently, so we have to go. What, already? Izuku asked, looking frantically back at Kachan. Sensei's orders, was all Shigaraki said, as he dragged him away. Just wait, hold on. Kachan, don't be stupid, okay? Just stop fighting! He desperately called back over his shoulder, even as he was dragged through the portal. Whatever, nerd, was the last thing Izuku heard of his friend before he was back in his prison. All he could do now was hope that the blonde actually took his advice. It was later that night that Broccoli woke up to what sounded like a huge explosion. He shot out of bed, frantically looking around. The whole room was shaking, and he could hear a commotion outside. It seemed like the heroes had finally found them. Author's notes. The heroes have arrived! But will they be able to rescue them? Shigaraki is just lonely and needs a friend, lol. I personally love the idea of him and Izuku being able to become friends, and had their lives been different. Dad for One is such a creep, but oh so fun to write. This chapter was just going to be 3K, but I kept adding Dad for One scenes, and it became twice as long, lol. Hopefully it was good. Anyway, as always, thank you everyone for reading and for your continued patience, comments, and support. I love reading every single comment. Your theories seriously make my day and make me super happy. I'm so glad that people are still enjoying this story. Hope you all have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. P.S. A lot of people seem confused and are asking if All For One used a quirk on Izuku when his memory got wiped, but I just wanted to clarify that he didn't. It's all related to Izuku having DID, which was was based on similar episodes I've had IRL, which is why it was really hard to write, cause, memory loss. I basically had to ask friends and family for outside perspectives, since I could only remember a strong feeling of dread, followed by a blackout/dizziness. Hope that cleared things up. Love all of your comments. And that's a wrap on chapter 42. I hope you guys enjoyed so much. I really like this one because it makes All For One seem sweet, but then you look at the subtext and you're like, wait, no the fuck he is not. He is being an emotionally manipulative bastard and dickhead, and just like, I think I especially notice it when he's like forcing himself on Izuku. Like, especially when he's forcing himself on Broccoli specifically. He's like forcing him to let him hold him and stuff like that, which, like, it just, you don't do that to people. You don't force them to do things they don't want to do that make them extremely uncomfortable. Anyway, please go show the original author Texiliaz some love. Please leave me a comment. I love, love, love reading your comments. They make me so, so, so happy. Please leave me specifically hate comments, and I will heart them and shout you out in the next video. Speaking of, there are a few people I have to shout out, so shout outs to Horizon on Bookworm, Solar Flash 99, and Jennifer Banmer 6812. Yes, I did threaten taking away your loophole, but I never said I did take it away. It still works, people. Also, I'd like to address FaeAreCryptidsToo. I accept your proposal, and so would you guys meet my new fiance, FaeAreCryptidsToo. FaeAreCryptidsToo, please give me some form of contacting you so I can tell you my name, since you're a Fae, and then you'll own me. Anyway, all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye, pups.